Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 507 for the 8th of July, 2018. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Haven't been in the country for about a month. Nice to be home again. Bit of a jet lag going to catch up with me pretty soon, I'm sure, but never mind. We'll struggle on. We'll struggle on. It's nice to see the Skeptic Zone cats again, Henrietta and Maud, who looked at me and said, yeah, where's the food? And it's nice to be back to a little taste of winter here in Sydney, Australia. Coming up on this week's show, Diet Skeptic. The Diet Skeptic Mandy-Lee Noble will be looking at a very unusual therapy, emotional freedom techniques, or tapping. This is where people tap on various parts of your body for various health reasons, or that's the claim anyway. Tapping for health. Emotional freedom techniques coming up at the top of the show with Mandy-Lee Noble. Following that, what a treat. What a treat. What a wonderful day I had at Oakland Zoo only about 3 days ago with Dr. Eugenie Scott. Now, long-time listeners to the show certainly know of Dr. Eugenie Scott. We've had many adventures together. 6 months ago we went to the Big Trees National Park in California. Well, a couple of days ago we were at Oakland Zoo. And trips to the zoo are always fun. I enjoy trips to the zoo. But a trip to the zoo with someone of the stature and the knowledge of Dr. Eugenie Scott when it comes to evolutionary matters is quite something. So you could be a fly on the wall or a fly on my shoulder or something like that as Dr. Eugenie Scott and I wander around Oakland Zoo and see what there is to see. Then to wrap up the show, a short story by our friend Dr Ken Harvey and his continuing quest to keep the government accountable, the regulatory bodies accountable when it comes to matters of health care and health claims. And he's going to be looking at a product called Ease-a-Cold. Does it ease a cold? We'll find out. Now stay tuned at the end of the show where you will have the chance to beat odds of 8,640,000 to 1. Curious? Stay tuned. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, have an extra large cup of coffee to keep myself going for a little while longer before the jet lag takes over, and some lovely Vegemite toast. I have missed my Vegemite over the past month. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. That looks good enough to eat. Or does it? Here's the Diet Skeptic, Mandy-Lee Noble.
Hello, Skeptic Zone listeners. Mandy-Lee Noble here, dietitian and skeptic reporting from Brisbane. This week on the Diet Skeptic Report, I will be discussing psychological acupuncture, a counselling therapy known as emotional freedom techniques, often abbreviated to EFT or more commonly described as tapping. Emotional freedom techniques were developed from elements of exposure therapy, cognitive or thought-based therapy, and mindfulness mixed in with acupuncture, neuro-linguistic programming, and energy medicine. As a dietitian, what drew me into taking a deep dive into the evidence for emotional freedom techniques is its recent application in weight loss programs. There are several credentialed health providers in Australia offering EFT to address food cravings to achieve weight loss. Furthermore, the Dietitians Association of Australia is currently promoting training in emotional freedom techniques under its Centre for Advanced Learning initiative. Emotional freedom techniques is a self-administered therapy where you tap on acupuncture points with 2 fingers on the head and upper body in a given sequence while repeating prescribed statements relevant to the issue you are focusing on improving. EFT is an accessible, easy, self-administered therapy. There are many instructional videos on the internet which fully demonstrate the process. Tapping is often promoted by its proponents as a bit weird but evidence-based. In this report of the Diet Skeptic, I will look at the validity of the studies that have tested EFT as a treatment for food cravings and measured the effect on weight loss. I have also called on a special guest to comment on the scientific plausibility of psychological acupuncture. Firstly, to the evidence for reduction in food cravings and weight loss. Australian and Bond University Associate Professor and the Program Director of Masters of Psychology, Dr Peter Stapleton, is described as a leader of worldwide research into psychological trials into new therapies in the area of obesity and weight management focused on clinical EFT. I found 3 trials for food cravings that also manage weight loss, co-authored by Dr Stapleton. But firstly, before we look at the outcomes of these trials, it must be said that EFT includes other elements of evidence-based treatments and that none of these particular trials test for whether it is those elements as opposed to the tapping that has produced the results. Also, each of these 3 trials relied on self-reported data. In the case of rating outcomes around food cravings, although validated tools may have been used, these are still subjective measures. Finally, the research papers on EFT have come from a very small pool of researchers, many of whom are authors on multiple papers and some of whom have significant commercial interests in EFT. Starting with the most recent of these 3 trials, the trial reported significant improvements for body weight, depression symptoms, and a psychological measure for the influence of available food at 12 months. The paper was published in the journal Explore in 2018. David Gorski of Science-Based Medicine has described the journal Explore as a sham masquerading as a real scientific journal, which publishes truly ridiculous studies. The trial had no control group, and despite the fact that participants had to pay around $250 to be included in the trial, it still suffered a 25% loss to follow-up. The losses to follow-up were merely excluded from the data, and no investigation into whether the losses were random or connected to a lack of success in treatment was ever done. The second study was a non-inferiority study comparing cognitive behavioural therapy, a gold standard for eating disorders, with EFT, measuring food cravings and weight loss as an outcome. This study potentially has a better study design than the previous study, which may explain why it was published in the Journal of Applied Psychology. At 12 months, both groups demonstrated a clinically meaningful reduction in food cravings, and it was concluded that EFT was not inferior to CBT. However, there was no significant reduction in weight in either group. The third study showed significant improvements occurring in weight and subjective measures for food cravings at 12 months. However, this study was published in the Journal of Energy Psychology in 2012. It also had no control group and over 50% loss to follow-up. Participants who continue in trials are possibly more likely to be perceive a benefit than those who are lost to follow-up, and this may represent a bias in the results. So to sum up the evidence for EFT as a treatment for improvements in food cravings and weight loss, the trials are mostly published in low-quality journals and mostly did not have control groups or a study design that could demonstrate whether tapping was responsible for the measured effect. No trials were longer than 12 months, which, given the current evidence on weight loss, which is that weight loss is maximal at 6 to 12 months, and regardless of the degree of initial weight loss, most weight is regained within a 2-year period, it could not be concluded that any of the current trials provide evidence of long-term weight loss. It is also worth mentioning that weight regain is driven by physiological factors as opposed to specific food cravings. As for the plausibility of energy psychology, I thought I would ask someone who is an expert in things energy related. My husband, Dr. Chris Noble, research physicist. Chris, is there any evidence for subtle energy pathways such as meridians and acupoints in the body?
No. These subtle energies are poorly defined and are mostly assumed to be outside of our current understanding of physics.
Chris, do you know what this energy would be?
Well, as far as I can work out, the working hypothesis in energy psychology is that tapping produces electrical signals at acupressure points via the piezoelectric effect, and these signals then travel to other organs in the body, such as the amygdala, through collagen, a semiconductor in connective tissue.
But isn't there collagen throughout our bodies?
Yes, and the idea has very little prior plausibility, but it is easily testable, and there seems to be very little effort to test some of these basic principles, despite an entire journal devoted to energy psychology.
So, Chris, other researchers have tested EFT using functional magnetic resonance imaging. Could a functional magnetic resonance imaging test that is used to demonstrate brain activity in response to stimuli be used as a credible test for EFT?
No. With no plausible mechanism for energy psychology, it would not be credible to use fMRI results as evidence for EFT. It sounds great in media releases and gives an aura of science, but before you use it to try to prove something like EFT, you really need to be exactly clear about what you were trying to measure.
Well, thank you, Chris, for clearing up those points. So I think, listeners, we would all do well to heed the disclaimer on Dr. Peter Stapleton's website. This material is for your general knowledge only and is not a substitute for traditional medical attention, counselling, therapy, or advice from a qualified healthcare professional. And if you wish to embark on your own tapping journey, you will find EFT is promoted as the universal healing aid, a personal healing tool that can be applied to improve any human condition, both physical and emotional. EFT is promoted for all of the following physical conditions: allergies, migraines, pain management, chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple chemical sensitivities, hypertension, fibromyalgia, cancer, muscular dystrophy, Parkinson's disease, cystic fibrosis, and multiple sclerosis, as well as other challenges such as behavioural issues in children, relationship issues, anger management, stress management, depression, anxiety, insomnia, PTSD, addictions, sexual abuse and phobias. EFT is also claimed to promote life abundance, weight loss and career goals. And finally, some certified EFT Universe practitioners provide additional EFT services, such as matrix re-imprinting for resolving issues in one's past, or even quantum EFT services for those with unresolved issues stemming from a past life. So, until next time, Skeptic listeners, this has been Mandy-Lee Noble with special guest Dr. Chris Noble, signing off for the Diet Skeptic Report.
Hi, I'm Darren McKee, one of the hosts of The Reality Check. Each week, my co-host and I explore a range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. You can find us on iTunes, your favorite podcasting platform, and on Facebook by searching for The Reality Check, or by following us on Twitter at TRC_podcast. Until then, keep an open mind, but not so open your brain falls out.
Remember that some months ago I accompanied Eugenie Scott as we went to the big trees in California. Well, today Eugenie and I are at the Oakland Zoo, and Eugenie, this paper thing you have in front of you is a map, and we were just discussing how, to our disbelief, there's a lot of the younger generation who aren't sure how to use maps.
Get off my lawn. I mean, it sounds like we're a couple of crabby old people.
Yeah.
We certainly are not crabby old people, Richard.
But we know how to use a paper map.
But Richard keeps trying to, he keeps taking his thumb and forefinger and trying to expand it, but it's not going to work that way, Richard.
I know, and I tried talking to it. I said, take us to the lines, and it didn't answer back.
No. This is a map. It is a two-dimensional paper product upon which are written little lines, and in this case, the map of the zoo. Lovely pictures of enclosures with little pictures of animals, and this is going to be a fun day, Richard.
It's a brilliant, warm, sunny day here in Oakland. We've just walked into the zoo. There's flamingos right in front of us. There's lots of children here today, which is a good sign.
Absolutely.
And we're just going to wander around and see what interesting things we can discover at Oakland Zoo. We've just come to the fence here, the little enclosure, the big enclosure of a tortoise, and it's in the distance there, and it looked like a clump of rocks. But you're just about to say something about their history.
Yeah, Galapagos tortoises have a definite role to play in inspiring Charles Darwin's idea about natural selection. Darwin was having dinner with some residents of the Galapagos Islands, some European residents, and one of the residents casually mentioned, so-and-so is able to tell you what island a turtle comes from just by the shape of its shell. Uh-huh. And, of course, one of the things that triggered Darwin's idea about the mutability of species, as they called it back then, the idea of evolution. And, of course, the idea that different islands would be petri dishes for the adaptation of very similar organisms, but different because of their adaptation for the particular environment, is one of the ideas that stimulated Darwinian natural selection.
If I remember the story correctly, I think it had to do with the ridge directly behind the neck. I think I remember reading that or seeing that he could tell because the ridges were slightly different. But you're right, it was basically the shape of the shell he was looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's details, of course. The other, and of course, Darwin didn't really twig to this whole idea until he got back to England and started looking over his notes and looking over the collections. Darwin, of course, was an excellent geologist, but he really was not an expert on either reptiles or birds or any of the other animals that he sent back in large quantities from his voyage on the Beagle. And it really was the mockingbirds that helped secure this idea that animals on different islands would be adapted to slightly different environments, even though they all were very similar.
Yeah.
So from that, it was pretty easy to come up with a hypothesis that, well, maybe all of these animals had a common ancestor and then diversified as they were separated on these different islands to adapt to the different environments of those islands.
And this tortoise of ours over there, his head's now come up and we can see a little bit of movement, but he's not exactly leaping all over the place, but you wouldn't expect a giant tortoise to do that.
For a tortoise, that is a great deal of activity.
It is. It's moved its head.
Oh, look at it. It's moving its head again.
It is. This is exciting. Take a photograph. There's another one. Look.
Oh, wait. You found another pile
We're
of
just
rocks.
walking over down the fence line here.
Leslie, aren't you going to look at them?
And we can see another one. Yeah, it's about 15 meters away, just sort of sitting under the shade of the trees having a good day. So 2, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
2. There could be even more because the enclosure they have for the tortoise is very big. In fact, please do not feed or touch the tortoises. Good advice. We won't do that.
Tortoises are really hard to get to breed in captivity. I noticed they have 2 here. I have no idea if it's a male and a female. I have no idea if they are attempting to breed them or whatever. I'm sure they would be absolutely outstandingly delighted if they did breed, but it's very difficult to get them to breed in captivity.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why, Galapagos tortoises and the subspecies that belong to the different groups there are eventually going extinct, unfortunately.
And we're walking around. I think I can see another one around this corner. Yes. Oh, that's somewhat closer too. We can walk around. The enclosures sort of bleed one into the other. Lots of room and space for them. It's very nice to see. Here's a little pond. Oh, that's nice. That's a reasonably close-up view now we're getting of this tortoise. Munching the grass. Look at that. Oh.
They look the same as the female ring-tailed lemurs, but our male ring-tailed lemur is often mistaken for a female. Why? Because when he... Yeah, this is the male ring.
Walking along here, looking across the chasm, and just on the other side we've got 3 ring-tailed lemurs. Completely enjoying the day.
Yep, that's what they do.
Strolling along, ignoring all the visitors. Ring-tailed lemurs, aren't they wonderful?
A lemur is a squirrel designed in Paris.
4 of them now.
Yeah, they're really so charming.
Yeah.
Really beautiful animals. Prosimians.
Oh.
And it's his forever home.
Casually, you can think of 3 major groups of primates: the prosimians, the monkeys, the apes, and the humans. And the monkeys, apes, and humans are much more closely related to each other than they are to groups like the prosimians, to which the lemurs belong, lemurs and patos and a number of other African and Asian forms. They're 2 separate, the monkey ape human group and the prosimian group are really 2 separate branches of the very large primate tree. They're often considered, quote, more primitive, quote, than the anthropoid or monkey ape human group. But as my old professor James Gavin used to say, primitive? Can you hang by your feet?
Now, it's an odd term, primitive. I've heard it before, but I know even Richard Dawkins writes about the term as it's so
value laden.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And the point is, if a group of animals or a particular animal is successful and is still here and is breeding and is fine, how can that be regarded as primitive in that respect?
Lemurs are very good at being lemurs.
Yes.
Or they wouldn't be here. I mean, there are a lot of animals that are being selected out because they can't survive in the Anthropocene or the human era in which we find ourselves. But, and unfortunately many primate groups are going to be part of that extinction event, possibly even lemurs. Lemurs are like these ringtails. They're restricted to a very narrow geographic area on the planet. Back in the Pliocene and earlier, Miocene and Oligocene, they were much more broadly spread, but now you just find them on Madagascar. And now with more environmental destruction in Madagascar, the habitats for lemurs and other ringtails and other prosimians on Madagascar is becoming reduced, and if you don't have habitat, you don't survive.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to say the habitat they've provided them here is wonderful.
Yeah, it's very
I mean,
nice.
it's as far removed from the old idea of walking along and seeing animals in cages as you can get. They've got their own hillside, trees, environment, shade. It's a cage nevertheless, but it's quite a nice one.
Yeah, I think these animals can live pretty contented in a very nice environment like this.
And they're completely acclimatized, or if that's the right word, to people, because there's lots of people here just chatting and looking at them like we are, and they don't give a damn.
Zoo animals vary hugely in that regard. I suspect animals like lemurs find us very entertaining.
Yes.
Let's go out and watch the people.
Yes.
Whereas great apes, well, specifically gorillas, less so chimpanzees, but certainly gorillas tend to be rather shy in temperament, and they really don't like being stared at. If you go to a gorilla cage, quite often what you'll see is the back of a gorilla.
Yeah.
Regularly, gorillas will either be sitting where they can't be seen or can't be seen as well, or they'll just sit with their back to the audience, to the viewing public. Now, these little guys here, these little ringtails, they seem to be perfectly content to be amused by us.
I think so. And they're just going about their daily activities, having a bit of food there, sitting in the shade, being lemurs.
One of the things that zoos do, and looking around this cage, I think they may be using that in this enclosure as well, is they hide food around the enclosure to make it a little bit more of a challenge, rather than just, here's your Purina lemur chow in this bucket over here near the gate. They will hide the various foodstuffs. In the case, these guys eat fruits and vegetables mostly. They're not fullivores, and probably some monkey chow too. Get the right protein and all that. But they'll secrete the pieces around the enclosure.
Enclosure, yeah, that's the best term, I think. Yeah, it's spacious. It really is.
It is. So they'll secrete the food around the enclosures, and then the animals have to kind of use their intelligence and use their senses, their sense of smell and color, vision, to find the stuff, and that's good for them. That keeps their little brains active.
Sure. That one over there, sitting there, look, it's looking right at us. What are they doing? Lemurs, fascinating. Baboons, from one primate to another.
That's us. We're primates.
We're primates.
We are primates washing other primates.
We are primates. Whoa! Did you see that?
They're very good at jumping, aren't they?
Leapt a huge... We're at the baboon enclosure.
They are, clearly, but this is specifically the Hamadryas baboon enclosure, which is significant because all baboons are not alike. Hamadryas are particularly interesting as baboons because they have a social system that's a bit different from your typical olive baboon or other. All baboons are ground-living monkeys, and they spend most of their time on the ground. They can climb trees. They generally sleep in trees. It's not that they can't go into trees, but their major adaptation is living on the ground, exploiting ground resources like rhizomes and grass roots and stems and things like that. But Hamadryas are particularly interesting among the baboons because their social system is different.
Oh, yeah?
Most other baboon species, you have a big group of males and females, and you have a male dominance hierarchy and a female dominance hierarchy. They all kind of live together. Hamadryas are different because they have a single male who has a group of females living with him, and then, of course, the children of the females. And this kind of what's been referred to as a harem relationship.
Well, that's what we can see at the moment. There's the big male there on this log over there. And there are so many little ones, lots and lots of children. Little young... Oh, there they go. They're all running across the face of that near the waterfall over there.
Yeah, there's I don't know much about this particular colony, but obviously they have monkeys of several different ages in here. They clearly are doing okay on getting them to reproduce. By the way, take a look at that big male. You see how he's got this gorgeous big coat across his head and shoulders, and notice how well groomed that coat is. That there's no tangles in that hair at all. It's really very smooth. The male gets a lot of grooming. And
it looks like it's just been brushed.
Exactly. He's really quite well taken care of, shall we say. But so a male will take over in the wild, not obviously in the zoo. A male will take over a group of females. and he will sire children of those females for the next several years until he gets too old or until another male comes along to kind of drive him off or replace him. And then that male will take over. The females remain constant, so to speak. The females and their offspring will be the core of the troop. So they're really the ones who, that's the continuity in the social grouping. The male children of the group will spin off when they become, teenagers, the equivalent of teenagers for baboons. A few years old, because they would be directly in competition with the single male head of the group. So the males spin off, but the females and their children remain, and they are the core of the troop.
Well, they look like they're having a great deal of... I'm going to just walk to the other end of this little walkway here, Jeannie, because we're standing in the direct sunlight at the moment, so we might get a better view from over here. They're having a great time. I mean, if I can understand their behavior, they seem quite happy. They're running around, jumping on things and climbing up a sort of a cliff wall here, and generally just hanging out.
Well, one thing that you'll find true of baby primates is they love to play.
They certainly do, and there's something quite cute about any baby mammal, I think.
Yeah, it's really true. You notice by the door over there's a couple of youngsters kind of wrestling and pushing each other and climbing up the fake rocks and having a good time. It's all, any mammalian play is a great way to develop the skills for being an adult, whatever that species is.
There's a little fella going up there. Well, you put a bunch of kids in there and they'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah. We don't call them monkey bars for nothing. There goes some chasing behavior.
Yeah.
That looks like a young male.
Possibly.
They may have to remove him from the troop at some point in the future. But then zoos have those kinds of exchanges. They'll swap animals around as they need to retain the appropriate social grouping. But yeah, that definitely looks like a young male.
And that's where, sadly, the recorder stopped recording. And unbeknownst to me and Jeannie, we went around and looked at some more animals, especially the great apes. And Jeannie was telling me all about the muscle structure and the arm structure and various points about evolution and where they diverged. And it was fascinating stuff. But sadly, when I checked the recordings later on, those recordings failed. However, I hope you can appreciate how lucky I was to have not exactly a guided tour around Oakland Zoo, a trip around a zoo with somebody who is such an expert in her field as Dr. Eugenie Scott. If you ever get the chance to visit a zoo with Dr. Eugenie Scott, I sincerely recommend you take that up. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you very much for a wonderful day at Oakland Zoo.
I'm Yvette D'Entremont, aka SciBabe, and I debunk bad science for a living. This includes health, nutrition, and general BS on the internet. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at Skepticon in Australia this October.
A story brought to my attention by Dr. Ken Harvey, a long-time campaigner for science and reason, especially in medicine, and especially when it comes to the claims of so-called medical products. This is reported at medreach.com.au, links in this week's show notes. MedReach Proprietary Limited, a story by Dr. Ken Harvey. Therapeutics Goods Administration's new complaint system fails at Ease-a-Cold test. Outcome of advertising complaints investigation specification 2018 enacted. And this was posted on the 5th of July. Stimulated by an article in today's The Conversation website, also links in the show notes, on Pharmacare Laboratories Ease-a-Cold, I have decided to try the TGA's new complaint system. The photograph accompanying has a picture of Ease-a-Cold, the packaging. Ease-a-Cold, cough, cold and flu, day and night. Specifically formulated to help shorten a cold, are the claims. As I mentioned in a comment on this article, this product has been the subject of a previous article in The Conversation in 2015. It has also had 6 upheld complaints by the now abolished Therapeutics Goods Advertising Complaints Resolution Panel, CRP, from 2005 to 2016, and a recommendation to the Secretary of the CRP in 2017 for failure to withdraw misleading representations that the product had, quote, been clinically trialled in the sense of being demonstrated to have effects such as reducing the duration, impact on daily life, or severity of symptoms of a cold, end quote. Typically, I could find no outcome of this recommendation to the Secretary, TGA, on the TGA website. In addition, there was a decision to withdraw advertising approval in specified media only, not the internet, by the TGA on the 11th of October 2017. Regardless, this product continues to be advertised with claims that have been repeatedly judged to be misleading and deceptive. Furthermore, Pharmacare Laboratories has the unenviable reputation of having the most upheld complaints by any sponsor of complementary medicines over the 10-year life of the CRP. However, upon submission of the attached complaint, I received the following error message. And the message reads, in red, "We're sorry, but something went wrong. Error ID #B922EEFD-3AA1-4AF2-9C." I think you get the message. "We've been notified about this issue and will take a look shortly. Thank you for your patience." This is the same error I reported to the TGA when I tested their system on the 17th of May. It's a pity it remained when the system went live. I submitted that this complaint should have been addressed as, quote, high priority, end quote, because the sponsor is recalcitrant, the product has a number of upheld complaints, and the varied advertising claims by the sponsor and many others continue to state or imply that the product will shorten the duration and severity of a cold when it will not. I allege, repeated, breaches of the Therapeutics Goods Advertising Code 2017, sections 4.1b, 4.2a, and 4.2c. In addition, specific indications on the ARTG public summary documents are equally misleading and deceptive. I asked for an immediate response from the TGA to me as to the priority allocated to this complaint and subsequently the measures taken by the TGA to achieve compliance and the outcome for publication. I am concerned that the recently enacted Therapeutics Goods Information Outcomes of Advertising Complaints Investigations Specification 2018 only states that, quote, the following specific kinds of therapeutic goods information may be released by the Secretary to the public under subsection 61(5)(c) of the Act, end quote. It remains to be seen what we get back from the TGA for the attached test complaint. Now, the reason I'm bringing you this story, and it's worth clicking on the link in the show notes to have a look for yourself, is to reiterate how important it is for people like Dr. Ken Harvey to be the, what's the term, the barking dog, the watchdog, the dog at the heels of government regulation, to keep them honest, to keep them up to date, to keep them aware. Because sadly, all too often, things like outrageous claims for complementary medicines just sort of slip under the radar, go unnoticed or at least unacted upon for many years. Hence, we have products that claim to be all natural, etc., making outrageous claims that simply don't stack up when put to the test. Now, this may be the situation where you're listening to this show anywhere around the world. Companies they'll get away with what they can get away with. And if they can make products cheaply, quickly, especially homeopathic products, which obviously have no benefit in a medical sense, and make outrageous claims, well, that's what companies tend to do. So it is vital that people like Dr. Ken Harvey keep on their case.
Hi, this is Dr. Pamela Gay from Astronomy Cast. Each week, Fraser Kane and I take our listeners on a fact-based journey through the cosmos. With our weekly podcast, we explain not just what we know, but how we know what we know about this universe that we share. Check us out at astronomycast.com and look for us in iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you download podcasts. See you online.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, as promised, I'm going to give you the chance to beat odds of 8,640,000 to 1. And as long-time listeners to the Skeptic Zone know, every once in a while we play the dice game, where I have a series of dice here. I have a 4-sided die, a 6-sided die, a 10-sided die, a 20-sided die, a 30-sided die, and a 60-sided die. All right. It's your chance to use your prediction powers, or your powers of just dumb luck, maybe. I'm going to roll each of these die, tell you the answer, and see how many you can get right. Maybe you are psychic, who knows. All right, so first is the 4-sided die. It's in the shape of a pyramid, so here we go. And it's come up with 2. That's the first answer is 2. You move up to the 6-sided die, the standard die. Here we go. 6. Let's move up to the 10-sided die. Shaking this. 5. 20-sided die. Here we go. 20. For those of you playing along at home. And we move up to the 30-sided die. It's quite chunky, this one. They keep falling off the table. I'll try it again. 13. Lastly, the 60-sided die, which is quite big and almost quite smooth. Very little variation, but good enough to come up with a random number. Here we go. As it rolls around and off the table and back again, and come on. Keeps rolling off the table. Oh, it's steadied now. 57. So the numbers you want are 2, 6, 5, 20, 13, and 57. No supplementary number. If you got all those right, you beat odds of 8,640,000 to 1. And maybe you should apply for the Australian Skeptics $100,000 Psychic Challenge. If you think you have a psychic or a paranormal power, why not apply at www.skeptics.com.au. There's information there about the $100,000 challenge. Yes, it's certainly good to be back in Sydney, Australia, back in the Skeptic Zone studios. And the Skeptic Zone cats are all over me, which is really nice. In fact, they've just run out of the studio at the moment, but they're looking for me for food, I think. Food and back scratches. Thank you to Mandy-Lee Noble for this week's report, and a big thank you to Dr. Eugenie Scott for being such a good friend. A good friend indeed. And what a pleasure it is to go anywhere with Dr. Scott and have her explain interesting facts about natural history and evolution. Coming up on next week's show, undoubtedly we'll bring you highlights of the talk coming up here in Sydney by Dr. Angela Matkey on the 12th, Thursday the 12th at the Occidental Hotel just near Wynyard Station. More details on this week's show notes. Hope to see you there at Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. But until next week, and with the jet lag rapidly catching up on me, I think it's almost time for bed. This is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.